As of the 1st of March, cable companies across Canada began the great unbundling. Cable subscribers no longer must buy packages of channels. They now have more choice, and by the end of the year, under what's called pick and pay, they can just get the individual channels they select. Sounds good. So is it? Let's find out. Here's Fern Downey. She's president of ACTRA, and James Bradshaw is here, the media reporter for the Globe and Mail. It's good to have you two in those two chairs here at TVO tonight. Let's put this chart up just to start understanding why people may be cutting their cable after all of these years. And they're number one with a bullet. The reason they say that they are cord cutters is they can't afford it, spending too much money on cable TV. So James, with that, we want to find out, now that we're in a new world that offers so-called skinny basic packages, how popular are they?
I think it's a little early to tell because they only really took hold on March 1st. The early evidence is that a lot of people are finding that maybe they're not quite the deal that they sounded, and we can get into a whole bunch of reasons about how TV channels are packaged and the slicing and dicing that the big cable and satellite companies do that explain that. I still think for a segment of people who have very basic wants and needs, there is a chance to trim your bill and get some value here. But I'm not sure we're about to see a great sort of rush to smaller TV packages just yet.
Fern, if the case, as we saw in that graphic, is that half the people cut their cable because they think it's too expensive, do you think this potentially represents a way of getting those people back?
In truth, I don't see very much hope for enticing people back with a skinny basic option. It seems like the whole thing is a little bit out of balance. The idea is aspirational. Wouldn't that be great if we could get better value on our cable packages? But I just don't see, with the early shading that we're seeing now, that is going to actually be the case.
It's early going, admittedly, but why the pessimism?
Well, it doesn't look like it's going to give people a greater value in terms of, even if you can choose the pick and pay when that all comes in at the end of the year, it looks at first blush like it could be quite a bit more expensive in terms of the individual channels that people who love TV and actually want to have. I think it's there's an illusion of choice in that you can build your own package, so that will be made very pragmatic. Yes, you can build your own package, but will it be cheaper for you? Will you feel better served? Will you feel happier as a consumer?
We don't know that yet.
We don't know that yet.
Skinny basics, like $20 or something a month? Is that what we're looking at?
It's capped at 25. The couple of caveats you have to put on that are, number one, that doesn't include the rental of the set-top box, that little box that sits on your TV and actually brings the signal in. And it also, in a lot of cases, it's not eligible to be bundled along with internet and phone service. And so if you switch to it, you may risk losing some of those discounts and your bill could actually go up. The last thing that's actually also worth noting is that pick and pay channels, the individual channels that everybody's been waiting for so that they can buy just the ones that they want, tend to be quite expensive. So far, it looks like most of them are coming in the sort of $3 to $8 range each per month.
Which doesn't sound expensive.
Until you start adding 3 or 4 or 5 of them together. Sports channels, if you're a sports fan, much more expensive than that. And I think part of what's going on here is that services like Netflix or Show Me or Crave TV, the streaming services that are pushing in on TV's territory, have changed people's sense of value. They tend to cost $8, $9, $10 a month for everything they have. Right. And that's sort of readjusted people's sense of what is fair to pay.
Meaning if I'm going to put out $8 or $9 or $10, I want to get the whole universe, not just 5 or 6 or 7 channels. Is that the idea? Okay. Yeah. Have they had something like Skinny Basic in Quebec for a while?
Yeah,
how's it working?
Videotron has had something like this for a while where they had a pretty small basic package, and then on top of that you could add sort of pick-a-packs or build your own packages where for a set price you could choose 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 channels. And I think by and large it's gone fairly well and it's been fairly popular, and you're starting to see some other companies copy that because of the new regime now. It's always a little bit difficult to tell with a province like Quebec, though, that is linguistically distinct and culturally distinct and sometimes plays a little bit by its own rules. And so it's sometimes hard for the English language majority of the rest of Canada who are living right next to the behemoth United States and its Hollywood content machine. It's hard to tell.
I'm going to quote you, but then I'm going to give you the first crack at commenting, okay?
All right.
This is James Bradshaw in the Globe and Mail at the end of February. He says, last December, a study by Toronto-based consultant, is it Nordicity? Is that how he says it?
Nordicity.
Nordicity, okay. And Peter Miller, albeit one commissioned by unions and associations for producers, actors, and other industry staff, warned that Let's Talk TV policy changes could sap $400 million a year in funding for Canadian programs out of the system and cause the loss of 6,830 jobs. Fern, we got a $6.6 billion industry, right, in Canada, $6.6 billion a year. Are you concerned we're looking at job losses like that because of the new rules?
I am. The combination of the new rules, it seems to be it's not just one thread or another thread, it's a combination of threads. And the whole broadcasting, television, and film industry is something that we've built up as a community very carefully over a long period of time. The Broadcasting Act, the Telecommunications Act, we've worked on all this to make it balanced between audiences, what audiences want, what the creative community offers, everything. It's a very balanced environment. And this seems to pull the threads in potentially very unattractive ways for people like me who care passionately about the creation of new Canadian content and new Canadian work. If you don't feed the system at the beginning, how are you going to continue to have those opportunities?
Well, just explain it through. How exactly, through the new rules, do you fear 7,000 potential job losses?
Well, that's from the Nudicity report itself, and he does different scenarios. But the combination of, so for example, something like Netflix, which is a wonderful big disruptor in our country. So Netflix has subscription-based something shy of $500 million, and they don't pay HST. They don't contribute to the creation of Canadian content. As more content goes online, Show Me and Crave are wonderful services that were designed to be complementary services, but have now been regulated to be standalone. And if people do cord cut, cord shape, then less money goes into the system at the beginning, goes to the Canadian Media Fund, goes into the creation of new work.
And therefore less production.
Less production. And that is not what I think Canadians crave, that are so proud of what we do in Canada.
James, just explain here, because the Canada Media Fund is what and does what?
Canada Media Fund is a substantial fund. Basically, the big TV distributors in Canada have to pay about 5% of their gross revenues every year to support the creation of Canadian content. And about 4/5 of that goes to the Canada Media Fund, which is a large fund that supports the creation of Canadian content. You can apply to it if you have a Canadian partner or if you are a Canadian creator. And it puts out, I think at last count, about $375 million a year.
Is it a federally regulated fund?
Yes, it is. And it was amalgamated from other funds in 2009 by the previous Conservative government. So Fern is absolutely right that because it's that 5% slice of gross revenues, if the revenues that the TV distributors and broadcasters are bringing in go down, so does the amount of money that gets funneled to Canadian content.
And therefore less production.
And therefore less production.
Therefore fewer jobs.
Therefore fewer jobs.
Yes.
So she's not just Chicken Little here.
I'm not Chicken Little.
Okay.
No, I mean, the job losses have already started. Bell Media let go more than 400 people since last fall. Rogers Media let go, I think, about 310 last year and early this year. And independent producers are starting to see job losses. So that part is real. Whether it's going to be 6,830 of them, there are a lot of assumptions made in that report, and I don't think any of us know how that is going to play out.
All right, but conversely, the dollar is at a very favorable rate if you're an American production company that wants to come to Canada to make productions. So if we lose on one hand, do we gain on the other hand? And maybe it's a wash in the end? I don't know, you tell me.
Generally, we find it's not a wash. When it takes a long time to plan your production. And when you're scouting to come to Canada, it's going to be years in advance of whatever the currency fluctuation might be. So we found year over year, we were very worried the year that our dollar was at par or better. Would any Americans come to Canada to shoot, to be part of our ecosystem? And you know, it didn't really make a whole lot of difference because they like our infrastructure, they like our tax credits, they like our actors and our crews and our locations. So yes, right now there's quite a bit of American production, particularly in British Columbia, which has a ecosystem largely built on service work. But I don't think it would in any way compensate for the lack of money going back into the system.
What about, James, there's a lot of first-rate Canadian shows on television these days, and they are sold all over the world, and I wonder whether or not the revenues from those sales end up back here making more productions here in Canada.
I think to a certain extent they do, because I think all these producers are trying to use the Canadian system and all of its strengths and all of its supports to make good content. But most people know Canada is not the biggest market, and you don't exist comfortably just selling within Canada. You want to be an international player. Sure. Content has gone global. So yes, I think to a certain extent it will come back, and some of the new rules are aimed at trying to funnel the dollars that we have going into the system to maybe fewer Canadian productions, but hoping to make some of them even higher quality.
What are some of the carrots that have been offered out there to get better productions and get producers to the producers and the networks, I guess?
Well, one of the things that's happened is they've said to the networks that the old requirement that 55% of what you have to air throughout the daytime had to be Canadian has been lifted. You still have to air half of your primetime content in the evening that's Canadian. But the idea was that people were having to buy a lot of shows. In a lot of cases, networks were rerunning shows throughout the day and buying them inexpensively to try and sort of fill up the quota. And they've said, we're going to relax that, but we're going to keep the total number of dollars that have to be spent on Canadian content the same. And we're going to hope that those get funneled into maybe fewer, but maybe better Canadian productions. It's a big gamble to take. We'll find out whether it works. But the idea is there.
Well, I don't like that they reduced the amount of Canadian content that must be exhibited in daytime. Daytime's an important time for children and other people. I just don't think it's trustworthy. The last time that they said, in 1999, when they said to the broadcasters, okay, you don't have to do exhibition requirements, we went down to one drama series. People in the system do better with the regulation being fair and smart and forward-thinking. And, drama and fiction is what people are really yearning for these days. That's the production that people are following and really watching, and Canada is doing very well in that marketplace.
Gotcha. You know who John Doyle is?
I do.
Yeah.
I thought you might.
I know him well.
Yes. We have a little clip from Mr. Doyle, who you may bump into in the Globe and Mail building from time to time. Sheldon, roll tape, please.
I think the internet came as a surprise to many in Canadian television, and they were slow. I think Canadian commercial broadcasters were slow to catch up with the internet, with the different platforms on which people can watch television. They're still playing catch up, and I think you can see that in the reaction, the horrified reaction to the popularity of Netflix from Canadian commercial broadcasters.
How much of a factor is Netflix in all of our discussion here?
It's a massive factor. And it's a huge disruptor in every sense of the word. And at a time when, because of that, there's a certain amount of instability in the system, right? So the kind of quiet chill that's happening in rooms right now where you don't have writers in pitching stories is because we haven't figured out how to get the big behemoths like Netflix playing as part of our ecosystem. Either they make a contribution to production, or they pay HST like they do in some countries, or they become part of our ecosystem.
Do they, are there any rules that they have to follow to be in Canada?
Right now, they don't follow a lot of the same rules. They don't contribute to Canadian content the way a Canadian broadcaster would, and you don't actually pay sales tax on your Netflix subscription if you go and look at your bill. Right now, they're
How is that possible? How do they get an exemption from paying
They
HST?
are operating under what's called a digital media exemption order, and there is a discussion about whether or not that should be changed, and about whether we should standardize, sales tax across digital sales. It's not an easy thing to do because, politically, the moment you say I'm going to tax you more, people say Netflix tax. I don't want that. But also, secondly, it's not clear that Netflix actually recognizes the jurisdiction of the Canadian radio, the CRTC, the federal regulator, to tell it what to do, because it says it has no Canadian presence. It says it does business outside of Canada, and
which is true.
Sends the, in a physical sense,
in a physical sense, yes.
But it's still in a lot of Canadian homes and taking a lot of Canadian dollars back across the border.
You'd love to see them somehow forced to pony up, I presume.
Well, I think they should, I would like them to be part of the system, and I think there are different routes. The simplest one is probably too simple. They rejected the idea several times, I think, but making a contribution to the Canada Media Fund like everybody else. They have their advantage now is too great. It's not a level playing field with the other streaming services.
Do they play by those rules in any other country in the world in which they offer programs?
Well, people are fighting to get them to come to the table. Australia and New Zealand are trying to get them to pay their equivalent of HST. And other countries are certainly in France, Netherlands, Kenya, are trying to get them to be more interested in domestic production or making a contribution to the creation of domestic production. There's different ways you could go. But I don't understand the balance getting so imbalanced with them being allowed to be our biggest library, our biggest... It's still all TV. People are still creating TV. They're just building libraries.
And are they fighting at every step of the way, James?
So far, they seem to be fighting it every step of the way, and they have a lot of leverage too because they're popular. And I think, you know, Fern makes an interesting point when she talks about the broadcasting system as an ecosystem and something that is a little bit delicate. It is already being disrupted badly by the expectations that a company like Netflix creates, which is mostly built on the libraries of content that traditional TV paid for and made. But because that is already happening, I think it's also dangerous to say, well, we shouldn't pull on any more threads. And I think for better or worse, what the CRTC is trying to do is saying, the disruption's already happening. We better get on board and pull the strings ourselves a little bit, because otherwise someone's going to pull them for us, and the status quo is not going to stand up.
You don't look thrilled with that characterization.
No, that's fair, except they missed their first chance to talk to the streaming services about being part of the ecosystem. But as James reminded us, they wouldn't rescind the digital media exemption order. So the biggest disruptors that have caused the most imbalance and the most potential chill weren't dealt with by this bundle of decisions that came out of the Let's Talk TV decisions.
Okay, but you know there are people watching us right now who are not fussed about all of broadcast regulators and Canadian content and all of this kind of thing. They'd prefer to see the Wild Wild West out there. And they may, have a leg to stand on when they make the argument that Canadian productions are mature enough, and we've been at this long enough, and we're good enough that we ought to stand on our own feet without any added regulations about Canadian content. We can sell our stuff anywhere in the world now anyway. What do you think of that argument?
We're a country of around 35 million people, I believe. We live next door to the greatest cultural exporter of cultural goods in the world. Ever. And the United States is the only country in the world who does not protect and promote their culture, because they don't have to. They created a whole different market reality. But for a country that has 35 million people, how are we going to have license fees that reflect the kind of work that we want to do? I mean, everybody does this. Everybody wants to see their own stories in their own country, holding the mirror up to their own society. I mean, everybody does.
James, do Canadian productions still need that protection?
I think a lot of them would struggle a lot without that protection. And I also think that the system as it exists, as I said, is a bit of a launching pad to take Canadian content internationally. Yes. And I think what a lot of people are concerned about is, I had somebody say to me that after these decisions came down, they'd been getting calls from talent in the TV industry saying, I better start looking for an apartment in LA. And I don't know if that's, a scare tactic or not. But I do know that there is a genuine fear that if we don't nurture an ecosystem here that allows people to have opportunities and to create good content and to learn how to write a script or produce a show or direct a show here, that they will go and do it somewhere else. Maybe not in LA, maybe in another country. And I think there is something to be said for saying we're going to stand up and support, an industry that is somewhat homegrown and that does reflect our tastes, our values, all of that sort of thing.
We seem to be all globe all the time here because we've had you on the program and we quoted you, and then we had the clip of John Doyle. So we need to hear from Conrad Jakubowski as well. Writing in the Globe and Mail earlier in March, here's Conrad, who writes, rules requiring domestic broadcasters to devote a majority of airtime to domestic content has provided jobs for thousands of talented and untalented actors, writers, producers, and directors. Their salaries are partly funded by governments and by cable and satellite TV providers, who hand a percentage of your subscription fees to the Canada Media Fund. The CMF doles out almost $400 million annually to make Canadian shows such as 19-2 or Working the Angles. For better or for worse, domestic content rules have not altered English Canadian viewing habits. For every domestically produced popular or critical success, there are dozens of ratings and critical duds. CanCon may have worked as an industrial policy, as a cultural one, it has not, says Conrad Jakubowski. Okay, fire away.
Are you kidding me?
I'm going to put you on the fence as undecided about that. No.
I mean, we have the best quality of television that we've ever created in our country. And it takes a while to get this good at what you do in terms of the creative side meeting the business side and meeting everything side. I mean, there's never been such choice and such integrity in shows and so many shows that travel the world. We are finding our global audiences. Yes, some shows don't work. Yes, we notice more in a small ecosystem like Canada because we only make so many shows a year. In America, it's, well, that's par
write
for
it
the
off.
business. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, but really, I mean, I just don't think that at this time when television is better than it's ever been, because content is still king in our world, however you're going to screen it, whether you stream it on your tablet, on your phone, you're still using all that TV expertise and all those brilliant people to make the stories that people do watch.
Do you have any sympathy for your fellow Globians' comments?
Here's what I will say. Two short things. The first is to hang on a little bit, because I did sit when I was writing about this recently with an independent producer who said to me quite plainly, we do understand that in some cases we may have been artificially subsidized. The system as it existed may have supported some players who probably weren't providing much value to it. And maybe it is time that some of them went away. His fear was that in trying to cull the unhealthy animals from the herd, we were going to cull a whole bunch of the healthy ones as well. The second part is there's a lot of talk right now about the golden age of television that we're in and how much good TV is being produced like never before. I do think people need to stop and think a little bit about where that comes from and where the dollars that produce that come from. And if everybody were to go to Skinny Basic and pick and pay for their channels and trim their TV bills by 30%, where do those 30% of the dollars that they used to be paying into this industry go, and what gets lost because of that? Because you talk to people in the industry and they tell you over and over and over again, creating good TV is still more art than science. We still haven't found the formula to make a hit. And there's a lot of trial and error, and some shows do flop, and some shows are made, frankly, to fill time on the dial.
I'm not sure, though, that you can, and I don't know that this is what you were saying, but it might have been what you were saying. I'm not sure you can guilt people into purchasing more channels than they want or spending more on content than they want in order to support the industry. Would you agree?
I would agree 100%. I only think people need to understand that there is a consequence to every action that they take, and that early this year, after the CRTC rules came out, it was pretty clear that there was a bit of a freeze on the industry. Not a lot of new shows were being commissioned or made, not a lot of dollars were being spent. We won't know what show didn't get made as a result of that. It's one of those consequences that in a way you never feel, but something will be lost in the shuffle. And when we talk about supporting Canadian content, that's the unknown in all of it, is what doesn't get made.
Well, let me see if I can find out. What are the best Canadian shows on TV right now?
I watched a lot of TV, but best is how do you pick among your children? I'm a little bit fond of 19-2 out of Montreal right now. It was such a surprise. It's another cop show. Motive out of Vancouver is a great procedural. Saving Hope is incredible.
With Wendy Crewson, who was here
Wendy
just the other
Crewson,
day.
yes, she is a goddess and a
new love of my life.
Well,
She's
no
so good.
wonder. Get in line,
She's
Steve.
so
though.
good, I know,
She's
I
a
know.
brilliant actor. There's just so many shows. You can go. And co-productions too. We're doing beautiful co-productions. But I like our television domestic series that are the adult, hour-long, the best writers in the game.
You haven't said Orphan Black yet?
Orphan Black, I know, let's face it.
Rookie Blue?
Rookie Blue. Rookie Blue just wrapped its last season. Incredible. Heartland is one of the longest running shows in the world.
Vikings?
As a family show. Vikings co-production out of Ireland. Visited their set. Love them.
They're not. Is this heretical to say? Those aren't exactly Canadian
No,
stories.
that's only a co-pro.
They're Canadian productions,
That's a
right?
co-pro.
But they're not exactly Canadian stories. So
It's called a treaty co-production. So it's Ireland, Canada. So the sets are all in Ireland, outside of Dublin.
would we lose those shows and that production and those jobs if the regulations that have kept those kinds of things alive were to change?
Well, co-production is a little bit of a different thing, but you still have to have money in our system to invest at the beginning of a project to have it all get begun. And if you don't have money at the beginning of the project and every season thereafter, then you won't get to play.
And just quickly, I think the CRTC's goal in the way it's shuffled the Canadian content rules, whether it'll work or not, I don't know, is to produce more of the kinds of shows that you've just rattled off with Fern and fewer of the sort of maybe reality-based, kind of daytime filler type shows that you can run over and over and over again because they're sort of evergreen, but they're not, bringing that really high quality in every case. And I think that's the goal, is to have less of that. There was a great quote whose source eludes me right now, which was, there are two kinds of TV, landmark and landfill. And I think they're trying really hard to get to the former.
It's good.
And I don't know whether they've got the right formula to do that
I
yet.
got to remember that one. Landmark or landfill. That's good, Bradshaw. I like that. Okay, we should reconvene you two in a year and see, once all the dust is settled, where we're at. Fern Downey and James Bradshaw, really good of you to come into TVO tonight and help us with this. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having us,
Thanks
Steve.
for having us.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.